The solution is going to be agricultural development. Steps toward increasing production of agriculture is really the only way we're going to move on to the next stage and the next step. If we have more food produced, not only are we going to be able to impact on hunger, but we're going to be able to have an impact on how the majority of the world's poor live. Because improving the agriculture sector raises the incomes of the world most vulnerable, not just those people, but others as well. For instance, the World Bank says that agricultural productivity is 2 to 4 times as effective as any other productivity in alleviating poverty. 2 to 4 times more effective than anyone else. Why? Because it has such a multiplying effect. Because we start with growing more food, we have to have more inputs to be successful in growing the food, so we buy something there, we grow the food, we sell that food, it has a nutritional impact on the people who consume that food. Sometimes if the community is sophisticated enough, it may be processed. That's another contribution to this process. If there's enough, it needs to be transported. That's another contribution. If the children are fed enough, they're more likely to go to school. It has a whole long cycle that means that agriculture development for the poor has a very significant impact. But when we think about development, though, and agriculture development, how much more can big producers produce is an open question, but I want to concentrate on the small producers, the smallholder farmers, and especially in this case in Africa, since I've talked before about the huge increases in African population. 80% of the farmers in Africa are smallholder farmers. Women do most of the work. They produce 80% of Africa's food. But when we look at the yields per ton, it's a fraction. 1.2 tons, for instance, per hectare compared to 5.1 tons than it is in developed countries. It is not really mechanized, it's mostly human labor. There's very little irrigation, especially even compared to Asia. But again, the potential for productivity and higher incomes is considerable. And there was one example in Zambia where a $1 increase in farm incomes essentially leads to another dollar gained elsewhere in the economy. Not quite at the level that the World Bank is showing, but it's almost impossible for investments in agriculture that result in increased farm incomes. It's almost impossible that those don't have a significant impact on the rest of the economy.